Good morning everyone. Let's start with our daily market commentary. Now what we see in front of us is weekly chart of Nifty. As we were discussing yesterday as well, on the weekly front, Nifty remains to be weak and it is yet going down. So two things have happened from yesterday. One thing where the election thing has now been passed. So people now know the fact that BJP is trying to make the government of Karnataka and stuff like that. But even after that, you can see the selling pressure still continues, right, on the weekly front. So Monday onwards, the selling has happened from the top of 10,940 kind of range. So this shows that it is pretty much clear the week can end up as a losing week for this particular 2 days left for the week to end. And as I see on the downside, it's pretty much lower around this 10,660 is the range where it can go. So that is where we need to focus on. And the second part, if these levels get breached, as we were speaking yesterday, 10,600 kind of range, then 10,400 is on the cards, right? Now let's go and see on the 4-hour chart, because things will be a little different on these charts. Rather than daily, I'm looking for 4-hour chart. Now if you go out and see what is different out here, where we see it was a gap down, and apart from gap down, there was continuous selling around this 10,777 mark. Okay, so this is pretty much clear that it is not trying to breach the higher level of 10,800, right? So it was trying to go up all the time, but not able to breach the gap and go higher. So on a smaller front, it is very much clear that if 10,777 or 10,775 is not taken out on the higher side, there is no upside for Nifty, right? So what's happened over here is pretty much clear. Gap down, test 1, test 2, test 3 of the same level, and it is going down. So on the weekly front, we are sure that it is going down. Apart from that, what has happened? Gap down, same highs have been made, right? So even today, what I see from the top, the selling has taken place. Even after opening a little gap up kind of situation, the selling still persists. So things are pretty much clear that for 2 days, it will remain range bound or downside for the levels of 10,600 kind of zone. So one thing is now very much out of sight, the higher upside for Nifty, number one. Number two, so does that mean Nifty will correct a lot? No. If you see on the downside, our important level is 10,600 kind of zone where it has to cross for another downside of 10,400, right? So that is the one observation which we have from yesterday and today, where continuous same kind of resistance has been formed after the gap down, right? So that is a clear indication, no bull strength, and more than that, there will be no bullishness if it does not cross the higher level of 10,777. Okay, coming down and seeing the same effect in Bank Nifty, seeing the same effect in weekly format as we were seeing yesterday. Still the red candle starts persisting. So 2 more days left. You can see the weekly strength coming down in Bank Nifty towards this 25,800 mark. So roughly around 300 points downside is clearly visible on Bank Nifty as well. The second part, again we go down and see the 4-hourly chart for Bank Nifty. Can we find similar things over here or not? What we see over here, yes, there was a small downside. If you see over here, a little gap down, but apart from that, only 2 candles made it to the high. So in Nifty, there was 1, 2, and 3. But here, if you see after a small gap down, there were 2 candles making the high. And then the third candle is almost far away from that gap. So that clearly shows there is no strength in Bank Nifty pushing itself on the higher side, right? So one thing is clear, Bank Nifty can be weak for the 2 sessions which are remaining for the week, and it can inch itself down at least by 200 points to 300 points in this zone of 25,800 to 900. So one thing is pretty much clear, when we see the 4-hourly chart, things are pretty much different because it takes half of the previous day and half of the current day. That is why the chart looks very, very different compared to daily and weekly, right? So when I see on the 4-hourly chart, it is pretty much a different sight or view that you can get for Nifty and Bank Nifty. So now coming down to these agenda the facts are known and we are seeing some kind of selling coming by, or you can say profit booking, downside is yet limited. Please try to understand. So on the Nifty as well, 10,600 is what we are trying to target, 600 and 650 to be more precise for the daily front. Okay, and because if it goes down, this is the range where it will go and stuck. Why will it settle around these range? Because of the red Moribazu, and then the reversal took place exactly from 10,620 kind of zone. There was a continuous selling off, and this was the prior gap. It came back down over here, took the second bounce, and if it comes back over here, it will take some time to cross this level. But the point is pretty much clear, as I was explaining yesterday. If this level is taken out, or if this zone is taken off, 10,620 and 10,650, there is a clear mark of downside towards 10,400, because the previous rally started from 10,400. And you can see the big Moribazu forming in that fashion, where the gap down bullishness was seen, and this is a strong support going forward, right? So this is what we see, a continuous sell happening in Nifty, and Bank Nifty seems to be weak. Now let's go and see some gainer and losers for the day. And what I see on the gainer side, there are stocks where Coal India, Infratel, Titan, Kotak, iShares. Now try to understand, no heavyweights are there in these gainers list. So there is no ITC, there is no HDFC, there is no Reliance. None of them are there in the gainers list. So this clearly shows the strength is not there from the heavyweights, right? So that is one of the good takeaway that we can see. There are some strength in L&T and Maruti. That's it. Among the heavyweights, Bajaj Finance results are going to be out today, so that is why we are seeing some movement in Bajaj Finserv. Now, trying to see on the losing side, who are the guys again on the losing side? I basically see again the commodity guys are there. So Hindalco, Tata Steel are again there, HPCL, BPCL, and IOC, all those kind of commodity stock. Important to note now is something called as Infi is on the losing side. So IT was never on the losing side. It was gaining strength based on USD INR. So first stock, Infosys becomes as a losing candidate. Hero Moto, even yesterday it was loser. Today it is trying to again lose. So Infi from auto, there is Hero, and then Lupin and Dr. Reddy. So pharma and IT, which are supposed to be on the strong foothold, are not so based on USD INR. So this clearly shows there is no more big strength on the gainer side, at least from the heavyweights, right? Except from little bit, 0.5% from L&T and Maruti. So this is one of the takeaway where we understand Nifty seems to be bearish, and apart from losers and gainers, the clear indication shows the gaining side there is no big heavyweight pulling up the chain. Now let us go and see the heavyweights like Reliance, which was one of the losing candidates of yesterday as well. So if I go out and see Reliance on the daily front, we had already discussed Reliance previously. The important levels for Reliance were these levels, where if these levels are taken out, a straight downside towards 935 is visible. So as we see on Reliance, Reliance seems to be weak and the downside is visible. Now let's see ITC. The results are done. On ITC, the strength has always been on ITC. Right from downside, it has gone up. Now what we see today, it has opened gap up, but the selling has come by. So it's kind of gap up bearish, right? So let's look at ITC. Seems to be weak. If ITC crosses yesterday's close and it is settling below that, then you can see much pressure in ITC on the way. So what is happening on ITC front? Even opening gap up, it is trying to go below this. And if I try to just put a level of yesterday close, was somewhere around 286 or so, right? So way it is going down, so you can basically see it can inch towards even 282 kind of mark, because this was the complete upside that we have seen. To be more precise, from these levels of 280, it can again come down to these levels of 280. So Reliance and ITC both are forming a bearish kind of stance. Apart from these two, if you try to see LT and Maruti, where they are on the gaining side, but can they hold on to their gains or not? Now, as we have discussed prior as well, LT and Maruti both have corrected, right? So these are not the stocks which are flying 52-week high. These are stocks which are already corrected. And obviously, when they are already corrected, you will see some kind of strength coming in. But the strength is not that big. All you can see, there were small candles and there is a small kind of a green candle trying to persist for the day. So L&T trying to pull itself higher, but the high point, if you try to see, little gap up and trying to push higher, is not what basically shows as a complete gainer. Going back to Maruti, so Maruti has also been one of the laggards. If you see right from the top, Maruti has been going down. The only point what we are seeing on Maruti, it is now consolidating at the lower levels. So when I see Maruti from the top, it has been corrected. But when I come down on the base, this is the level where it is trying to take some kind of support and can inch little higher. Right? So those two stocks which are seeming to be on the gaining list are basically stocks which are corrected. Right? So Reliance ITC on the top, they are correcting, but Maruti and LT are basically getting some kind of support, but you can see there is not a very big pullback in those stocks. Coming back to HDFC and HDFC Bank, so the two guys which have pulled Nifty higher through and through, what I see over here, after making 52-week high, it has taken a complete U-turn. Right? So HDFC Limited seems to be a little weak now, but what is happening on HDFC Limited, something which is very important to know, the highs were maintained, it opened gap up, zoomed higher, came back to the same level, zoomed higher, now it is coming back to the same level. So if this level is taken out on HDFC Limited, there is a clear free fall from this 1900 levels to 1850 levels. Why there is a clear free fall? Because the multiple time supports have been taken. If this supports gets breached, the rise was fast, the fall will be faster. Right? So HDFC Limited seems to be like Reliance. They both are under that crucial juncture where the free fall can happen. Coming down to HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank has been showing strength through and through. Right? So what I see on HDFC Bank, the same point happens the way we were seeing on HDFC Limited. This was the level where selling took place. It came back on the top, again tried to go up, came back down, opened gap up and zoom. Right. So this is the first time where HDFC Bank is also coming down, and where it can come down, it can easily come down towards this 1986 or 1980 kind of levels where the gap up has happened and the first rally of upside has taken place. Now try to understand the rally of upside which has taken place has been very fast. Right. And what we are seeing now, there are small candles which are building up the gain on the downside. So there can be one full red candle inching towards 1986, right? So the point is pretty much clear. Two big candidates, HDFC and HDFC Bank, seems to be very much on the downside, along with Reliance, and what we see is also ITC. So even on the daily front, there is some kind of downside which you can see. So even 4-hourly chart or daily chart, it does not matter. Idea is same. Those two candidates which were the heavyweights and pulling Nifty higher are now can become the culprit to pull itself down. So HDFC and HDFC Bank, two guys are on the bearish side. Reliance and again ITC, again these two guys are on the bearish side. Now you have Bajaj Finance results today. Let's just have a look on that. Now what we have seen on Bajaj Finance right from bottom, this was the low which was made, but after that complete Moribazu on the downside, it never ever touched even the base of the Moribazu. So 1530 was kind of level where a base was formed. That was after the budget. So if I try to see, the top was maintained during the result time and the correction came in, and it basically made a low in the month of Feb. Now after that, the important point to consider over here, a complete Moribazu was formed after opening gap down bullish. Now what I see over here, it never came back down to the base, but apart from that, if you take half of that candle, so from the top and to the bottom, half is approximately over here. It did retrace 50% of the gain, but never went below even these levels of 1580. The other part where you need to understand, it kept going up and down, up and down. The upside level was also tracked towards this 1740 kind of range, but one fine day in the April month, it starts approaching higher. Now after approaching higher, the zoom has already happened. Try to understand from the base of 1500 or 1600 kind of range towards 1900 or 1950, right? And now we are approaching towards the result. Now before the result itself, from last 3-4 days, it is going higher. So if it is a fantastic result, it might be a spike up, and then you can find Bajaj Finance also going down. So Bajaj Finance has given good kind of uptick, you can say, or run up for the upside, but the results are going to be out, so it's better to be out of that stock prior to the result. India Bull Housing Finance, the other NBFC, what we see on the India Bull Housing Finance is very, very interesting. What has happened after the result? So this was the result day. Once the result was announced, it did open gap up, but then the complete selling came by. After complete selling, if I try to see for the day, it seems to be like a complete red Moribazu, right? And if it forms a complete red Moribazu, it never ever touched back the levels of 1385. Number one. Number two, what I see over here, it never even retraced 50% of the red Moribazu. That clearly shows there is no more strength coming into play to breach 1383 after the result. So one thing is pretty clear, even if I put half of this candle over here, there was no retracement seen in India Bull Housing Finance. Apart from that, there was no retracement even half, but the continuous candles were formed below the base. So 1-2 candles were above that, and then if you see, the candles were making lower highs, right? And this was basically forming below 1320 levels. Now try to understand, after this 1320 levels, the rise was fast and steep. The fall was also fast and steep, right? So in matter of 3-4 days, you can see the entire fall or the rise which took place in 4 days. The fall also took place in 4-5 days. The agenda is pretty much clear. From the top, it corrected so much. Results were good. Try to understand. So results were good. The correction took place. It is one of the good candidates for the next result play. So idea is pretty much clear. The NBFCs. So why I'm looking at iBull today is because Bajaj Finance results are there. Even if it poses a good amount of result, you can see selling coming in following week or so, right? So after the results also, you can see selling coming in, as we saw in India Bull Housing Finance. Coming down to a couple of stocks where commodity stocks have a place. So Tata Steel, where the results were there, and now we have Vedanta, Hindalco. What I see on Tata Steel, from the top, it has corrected a lot, right? Now, it's a complete commodity play, but apart from that, what I see over here, there was a complete selling which took place. So this was the first bottom which was supposed to be made. Then it started going higher, and this was the second bottom made, and then it started going on the upside, but it never reached from the point where the fall took place. So the point is pretty much clear. Is it in the bullish territory? Not yet, because according to the uprise, it should have reached to these levels from where the fall had taken place, but that never happened. Apart from that, what I see over here, after a small upside, it again started coming down. Now, what we see at the bottoms over here, there were 2 red Moribazus. If you scan from point A to point B, there were a couple of Moribazus which were there and which made huge impact. So first Moribazu was over here. So what happened over here? So let's try to make a base of every Moribazu. This was the base of this Moribazu. It tried to go up, but it then crossed the Moribazu and went down, right? And then what happened? It again started going sideways, and this again formed one of the Moribazu. Now the second Moribazu which we are trying to understand has more significant because of 2 things. First, it was the second bounce, and second, after this, you saw the candle which is straight away with the gap up, and it tried to breach the higher level. It never even came towards the lower level. Again, you see the 50% of this particular bar is not being retraced. So it comes to 50%, but then it starts flying up. But here, if you see, it comes to 50%, but it does not fly up, right? So there is a striking difference between this setup and striking difference between this setup. Apart from this setup, going above this particular open, it is kind of double bottom formation. Fine, it goes up, it again comes back to these levels, but try to understand, when it comes back, it never comes back below this level, right? So this was an important point over here. When I see over here, again a complete red Moribazu was formed. Even after a complete red Moribazu, what I see over here, it does strikingly go down to exactly those levels from where you would have seen the gap up and the rise had taken place. It comes back down to the same zone, but what happens over here, it does not breach the base of the Moribazu. It does not breach the base of Moribazu. Second, it does not breach the gap up point which happened last time. More than that, what I see in couple of days, it has started going above the Moribazu level, right? So that clearly shows the downtrend is basically now being segmented, or you can say it has stopped for a while. But again, when I see the rise happening over here, it did not reach to the point where it is supposed to be. right? Now, as you are entering in the noise month, it will not reach to the highs so easily. It might take another month or so to come back to these levels of 680. Other point to understand, how would we see Tata Steel? The idea is pretty much clear. I am interested for the level of 560 to 575 kind of range. Let him come back down. Let me see what he does over here, and then you start entering into the trade. Entering in the trades over here for a small upside of 3%, 5% does not make sense. We should enter into trade at the lower end and should eat away the entire pie when it reaches towards 680. That should be our core agenda, right? So Mori Bazus become very, very crucial and important when the bottoms have been formed. Let's take Hindalco and Vedanta as well. Those are also your commodity stock. So when I see Hindalco, what has happened in Hindalco a couple of times, there was gap down and gap up opening. So it was a huge gap down, gap up opening because of the aluminium prices making circuit on the upside and the downside. Now try to understand what happened even in Hindalco. Let's forget about what has happened in international market on the commodity side. What has happened over here in Hindalco, it came back down. This was the upside that you would have seen, like a green candle, the way we saw in Bajaj Finance. But the point what I have to understand, the rise took place over here, the fall came back, right? Fine. So the point where it started, it came back to the same juncture. The idea over here was it formed the base, then it started going up, again came back down. So this was second time it basically tested the same line. But what happened after that? It straight away opened gap down. The gap down opening was below the line or not? So if the line opening, or I can say the support, has been breached with the gap down opening, there is no point for him to go up, provided that it fills the gap in this particular zone. So if the gap is not being filled ever, it will never go on the higher side. So if I see over here, the gap was formed. This was the support range and the gap down opening took place. It tested again and then it always went down, right? So after that also what I see over here, kind of double bottom, the first bottom, the second bottom, and then it started going higher. That was clear, but what is important to notice over here, it comes back to the same gap zone. So it comes back to the same gap zone and then it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days to fill this gap. Try to understand. So the gap down on a very strong support line becomes the resistance line going forward. So first this was acting like a support line, then it opens gap down, goes down, comes back up. The same support line now acts like resistance line. Now the important point over here, the resistance zone is with the gap. So it has to fill the gap and then it zoomed higher. But once it zooms higher, again it comes back down. The agenda is, again it gets stuck in that particular range, right? So these are the levels where you should always keep your eyesight on, right? Which are the good support levels and which are the good resistance level. And if you have gap along with those levels, it is a very, very crucial point to notice, right? Now what I see over here, it tried to go down but did not, again approached up and trying to go higher. Now what I see on the upside, if you see on Hindalco, this was the gap up point which was formed. So if I find just a line on the gap which was formed on the base and on the high side, this was the gap which was formed. And when I see it going higher, it is filling the gap, but is he able to convincingly go above 250? No. So once it tried, second it tried, third it tried, but it never went above 250. So there were so many candles trying to breach above 250, never filled the gap and went higher. So that clearly shows there is no upside left in Hindalco as well. So the downside is coming on Hindalco as well. Let's see whether the downside base is being maintained or not, because this is again the point of gap up, right? So the gaps are very, very crucial in the entire price charts. So this was the gap up which had formed. It came back down. Idea is it has to fill the gap in order to go high. Now second point, if it is going down, this was the gap up which was formed, but now it took multiple support over here. Let us see 228 gets supported or not. But if it goes and it opens below this kind of gap, you can see straight away again 200 on the cards. So just understanding gap, going on the upside, these gaps were formed, and going on the downside, the same gaps are much more relevant. Same if we go out and see Vedanta, same kind of structure will be seen more or less. So if you try to see the gaps for Vedanta on the top, it came back down. The structure remains same. This was the base which was formed. It tried to go up. Again, it came back down. Then it straight away opens gap down. Right. So this was the point where it opened gap down, trying to go down. First format, the second base formation. Then it starts shooting up. This is something interesting to watch out. It opens gap up with a complete Moribazu. But if I try to see, this was the gap zone which was formed. This was the gap which was formed earlier. Even after opening gap up and zooming, it took 2 days whether it should go higher or not. So always these gaps basically provide some kind of stop signals, right? It has to spend some time, maybe a day or two, and then only it can inch higher. But then I see again going down, and then it is inching downwards. Now what I see on Vedanta, the same thing persists, the way we are thinking for Hindalco. Let's see whether this base is taking some kind of support or not. The 275, 270 is the region where you need to take some kind of support or clues. The stock which has been talked about more is Tata Motors, right? So Tata Motors have been posting some good results and then bad results, and then it keeps going down. So let us see Tata Motors as well. If I see the daily chart of Tata Motor, what's been happening? So nothing great on Tata Motors. Whenever it goes on the high side, it keeps going down one way, right? And now this time when we see from this 450 mark, it has come down towards 300 or so. Now the important point on Tata Motors where you need to understand, the top was this, the last top if you see, from where the selling came by. So this was the top where the selling came by. It tried to go up, but again selling came by. So I can say the second round of selling has been coming from this kind of range. Okay, so removing the other levels, the point is pretty much clear. There are two important zones from where selling takes place. One is that 430 kind of level, the selling took place, and the second time, if you see multiple time, the resistance took place around this level of 380 or so. Again, it went down, and now it tried to approach to this level. The point was pretty much clear. It should have crossed this 380 mark to inch on the higher side, but it did not. If you see, the rise was fast. It went sideways, gap down opening, it came back down. So this was important juncture for Tata Motors, whether it could take support or not. It did take support, it went up, again it came down, and now what we see, reaching the lower support as well. So how can you find a bottom for Tata Motors? You cannot just go and find any bottom for Tata Motors. So buying at any level does not mean it will come back to the higher levels. The point is pretty much clear. If you go back and see on the monthly chart, the major support levels for Tata Motor comes around this zone. So these kind of levels can only be obtained on the monthly chart. Now when I see when the continuous selling is taking place, what's happening on the monthly chart? This was a continuous sell which I had seen prior. First time it bounced, came back down, and then again it bounced on the high side, almost to the same level, right? So these were the two bottom formation which was formed. Apart from that, the third rally, the previous rally also took place from the levels of 320. So what I see over here, 320 was a striking point or the launch pad for the first time, second time, third time, and now it is coming back to the same zone. Agreed that this can become a good support line around this 300 to 315 for Tata Motors. But can I say this will reach to 560 once again? So do not be in hurry. There will be time exactly when it should reach, right? So as you see over here, even that base, it did go up, but then again it came back to the same point, and then it started zooming higher. So don't just go in and trade on Tata Motors because the results are not being, you can say like Maruti, it is not a consistent performer, right? Sometimes results come good, sometimes it comes bad. So it is always important to look out for the previous result and the expectations of the result. So Tata Motor can remain dicey, but on the lower end, it is now trying to find some kind of support. The other stocks which are making low is basically Ultratech and ACC. Even on the cement side, if you try to see, actually the results are not that bad. But when I see on the cement side for Ultratech and ACC, what's happening from the top, it has come down. From the second point, the selling came down. The third time, the selling came down. Fourth time, again the selling comes down. But the good part for at least Ultratech, it is trying to find support in this range, and then the second support is around this 3860 mark. So one thing is good, it has undergone good amount of selling. If it comes down to 360 levels and you're approaching to the result calendar, it might find a good uptick going ahead. So as we saw from the last time, there was a good uptick which went in the month of April. So it did correct, and exactly in the month of April you can see the kind of rise taking place from the base support, right? So look out for these kind of levels on Ultratech. Just do not go and try to bargain for 1% or 2%. Let him correct, let a severe correction come in, and then wait for good result days to come by to take this trade. The worst chart you can see apart from Ultratech is ACC. Now what I see on ACC, there is no stopping on ACC. From this high it came back down over here. From this high it came back down over here. It tried to provide some kind of support in this range. But what I see apart from this, it again starts going down. So there is again, like Tata Motors, there is no stoppage. So how do I know? Go back to your monthly calendar. So when I see on the monthly calendar, it has always seen ACC going down very fast. So this is not for the first time. This is first time, second time, this is third time where it is coming down. The important point for ACC, this was the base from where it started going up. So the last time this was the base. So there are two bases for ACC. This is the first base where it went up, and this is the second base where it went up. So it is now approaching to the first base, which is 1330 kind of levels. So wait for ACC as well to breach around these levels, and let's see how the earning calendar pans out for the next coming month or so. So these levels become very crucial for ACC 1330, and on the downside the worst is 1200, right? So these kind of stocks which are falling and making new lows, do not get in and just buy for a bargain, right? So try to be very, very vigilant. Try to focus on stocks which are making new high. So if I look at stock like HUL, even on the monthly part, if you try to look at these kind of stocks, what's happening on HUL? Every time it is just trying to inch high. So this is not a linear chart. Try to understand. It keeps going high, but it always gives corrections or no, right? So whenever it gives correction, they become a good bargain buy. So even if I go on the daily front, so these kind of stocks should be looked at under correction zone. Now what I have seen in the month of April itself, it has zoomed up. It came back down with a gap down, but then I saw again inching on the reverse side, right? And then it tries to break the high, and then you saw gap down bullish, and it is inching much, much higher. So compared to ITC, HUL is on a very, very strong foothold. So keep that in mind even on HUL. So try to target these kind of stocks. Stocks which are making new highs rather than stocks which are making new lows. Obviously, the stock should be entered under correction mode, right? So keeping that in mind, checking back on Nifty, still remain the same. The downside still persists, and this is what we see after the gap down. Continuous test of 10,777. If this gap is not being breached, there is no upside for Nifty, right? Even on the downside, there is no huge downside, but at least on the downside, you can see 10,600 to 10,620, 620 to 650 on the cards, right? So thank you very much for joining in. We'll connect again tomorrow.